Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Houston. I'm Nick Miller alongside Aaron Barich. How you doing, sir?
Doing good.
Four-time Open Series top eighter. You got a win under your belt. We know you're a man that likes to wear cool hats and play aggressive decks, and you're doing both today.
Absolutely. I mean, any chance I get to play Naya, I'm going to take it.
Right. I asked you earlier, why are you playing a non-wedge deck? Wizards is just lining it up for you. You say, no, I want to play Naya.
Right. You play Naya. I mean, Siege Rhino's a really good Magic card, I admit, but Chain of the Rocks is a really good Magic card too. That's one of the best cards in Standard in my mind because Standard's so tempo-based. Right. So being able to play an aggressive shell with Chain of the Rocks is, I think, the best space to be for an aggro deck.
Right, that's interesting because you played in Richmond a few months back, an Abzan aggro deck with a lot of the same moving parts in this deck. You had the Gather Courages, and you had like the Become Immenses, but now you've moved away from that solely because Chain of the Rocks is basically, as you say, the best card to play?
Right. Back in Richmond, Standard was a little more, not as, the decks weren't as streamlined. So decks were a little clunkier, and you got punished way less for stumbling yourself, or for your opponent. You couldn't punish your opponent as hard for stumbling.
Right.
And now you can because all the decks are so streamlined, and Chain of the Rocks is very good at punishing those kinds of stumbles.
Right, the Brad Nelson school of thought is you want to be tempo-based as possible, and Chain of the Rocks is basically the best way to do that.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's take a look at your creature base here. You've got Warden of First Tree in 2 numbers, but you also have Elvish Mystic showing up as well. What's the thought process behind just 2 of that?
Well, the reason I'm only playing 2 Elvish Mystics is because it's kind of miserable to draw multiple copies of that card. Like, it's a very good card to play on turn 1, and any point past that, it's kind of lackluster. And if you have an opening hand with 2 Mystics, you'll play the first Mystic on turn 1, and turn 2 you'll play a 3-drop, and you just have this other Mystic dead in your hand. So you never want to draw 2 copies of it. Same reason I'm playing 2 Warden of the First Trees is you want to draw 1, and you want to have mana to sink into 1, but if you draw 2, then your mana gets split up in a way where neither card is as effective as just one is.
Right. Warden looks like a great card you can draw later in the game, whereas Elvish Mystic is not. So.
Right.
Of course, Elvish Mystic allows you to have turn 3 or turn 2 Fanatic of Xenagos and Goblin Rabblemaster, like a premier start for the deck, I assume.
That's one of the best things you can do. It's really similar to the red-green aggro decks of the format, which are all about having turn 1 Elvish Mystic and playing one of those cards on turn 2. And just like in those decks, it's insane in this deck. Very few decks can beat a turn 2 Rabblemaster on the draw because it just gets out of control so fast. So in that vein, those are just the best aggressive starts with Elvish Mystic, those 2 creatures.
Okay. Rounding it out, Fleecemane Lion, just the all-star at 2 mana. Heir of the Wilds gets through everything. And then 4-drop, Shaman of the Great Hunt, a card that's been popping up in the green-red decks, as you said, but looks very good in this deck as well.
Right, Shaman of the Great Hunt is just such a powerful 4-drop in Standard because when you're trying to play a tempo game, having an aggressive, powerful haste creature is so important. And his ability of putting 1/1 counters on your guys when they hit makes it where if your opponent is stumbling and your other creatures do get to connect, they just fall farther and farther behind. Kind of the idea of the deck is to get ahead, and because your cards are so powerful and they grind so much value, once you're ahead, it's very hard to fall behind.
Right, and you've got a ton of haste creatures in this deck in the forms of Fanatic of Xenagos, Rabblemaster, and Shaman. To have that much haste seems pretty good.
Right, it's very good in the format that's so, like, when one of the best kill spells is Chain of the Rocks, having haste creatures to get around the sorcery speed removal that your opponent's saving is very nice.
Okay. Now, we've all seen you play some Gather Courage. It was blowouts on camera at Richmond. Still just as good today?
It's even better today than it was in Richmond, actually. At the time in Richmond, there were the decks that were playing Lightning Strike and Vial Blight, and that's what Gather Courage is good at protecting you from. Now, there's even more decks playing those cards. Like, the 2 best decks in the format are now Abzan Aggro and Red-White Tokens, and both of those decks are based around playing 2-mana kill spells that kill your creature depending on its toughness. So being able to have a turn 2 creature and then Gather Courage it to protect it from their turn 2 kill spell just gives you so much tempo and puts you so far ahead. And that's the whole point of the deck, is to get ahead. So that's just another tool to help you get to that point in the game.
Not only the 2-mana removal spells, but Wild Slash is running around too.
Right.
So it allows you to out-tempo the people that are trying to get you with their 1-mana spells.
Absolutely.
So. Valor Stance, new card, Fate Reforged. You got 3 of that. How good's that been?
The card is very, very good against all the Abzan decks in Standard. They're packing a ton of removal, and most of their creatures die to the card. So in that matchup, it's just fantastic. It is kind of lackluster against the tokens decks, the red-white kind of tokeny deck and Jeskai tokens, because you can't really kill any of their creatures. Stormbreath Dragon unfortunately has protection from white, but outside of those matchups against every other deck in Standard, it's just fantastic. One of the best cards you can be playing.
Yeah. All the sweet tools these aggro decks get, none of them kill Stormbreath Dragon. You got Stoke the Flames, but you can't obviously support that. So dragon, although not quite as powerful against you, you got a lot more red and green creatures. So
Right. Storm Breath, I tried really hard to fit Stoke the Flames in this deck just for that card, and I just couldn't do it. My game plan is just hope to kill him before it matters.
all right, let's look at the sideboard here. You look very good against control, but you got a couple extra monsters you can bring in the form of Xenagos, and of course, Outpost Siege. Those cards very hard to answer.
Right. Against control decks in Standard, their removal spells really aren't that good for your threats. So your whole goal is to make them tap out on a turn to deal with your threats, and then resolve a Xenagos or an Outpost Siege. Outpost Siege to either draw you cards to outgrind them, because the card draw selection isn't very good for them.
Right.
Or if you're already ahead, just make it where you name dragons, and if they do cast a Crooks of Fate, they die.
Right.
Xenagos is in a similar vein if they have to spend a whole turn to Hero's Downfall him, because that's their only actual answer to it. And if they don't, he'll just grind value and eventually kill them. And if they do, they had to take their whole turn to cast the awkward 3-mana spell, because their spells in that deck are so color intensive and so mana intensive. Just getting up tempo of them is all you need to do.
Right, a lot of double blacks, a lot of double blues. They can't really cast multiple spells in a turn. So Xenagos, great answer there. A lot of other stuff here. You got 3 Wild Slash, some more tempo, as well as Glare of Heresy and Arc Lightning as your removal suite you can bring in.
Right. That's kind of the game plan against the red-white deck, is to just bring in as many solid tempo spells as possible. Because their creatures are so good at ending a game if you let them go unchecked, Monastery Mentor, Goblin Rabble Master, you have to have answers to them.
Right.
Even if you're playing the aggressive role, because the red-white tokens deck is so good at getting ahead.
Active player, please finish your turn.
Right. You got
Both
one more
players
Gather
take a
Courage in
total
here,
of
just kind of
5
for
additional
extra
turns.
pump spells. So
Yeah, you gotta have the one other Gather Courage, again, for the matchup like red-white, because you don't want to play 4, because main board, they don't have as many kill spells, but post board, they're definitely going to bring in more Wild Slashes and Anger of the Gods. So you need to make sure that if they have an Anger of the Gods, you still have a creature surviving.
last card here, Destructive Revelry. So many enchantments in this current standard, like it's never going to be dead, really.
Right. Whip decks, on the down low, but they're still popular enough where you have to support hate for them. If you don't, you're going to die to a Whip of Erebos returning a Hornet Queen.
Yeah.
So you got to play something. Destructive Revelry, just the best option.
All right, well, the deck looks sweet. It's definitely a Aaron Barich deck, so it's something we've come to expect. Also talk about the mana base. You can support 11 fetch lands in this deck, 3 of which being Evolving Wilds. We won't. Sort of fetchy, but...
Wizards is making me play Evolving Wilds, unfortunately, but it does help me support Chain of the Rocks, because playing a 3-color Chain of the Rocks deck is very difficult.
Right.
You need to play at least a minimum of 10 mountains in your deck.
Right.
So you have the 4 Wooded Foothills, 3 Evolving Wilds, and 3 mountains. And with the advantage of playing this many fetch lands, is you can play more than 1 Become Immense in your deck.
Right.
Because Become Immense is an absolutely busted magic card when it gets going. It's very, very hard to play around. So being able to support a 1 mana +6/+6 is huge.
Yeah, I can see where just fetching alone helps you get this card out for 2 or 3 mana. All right. Aaron, this deck's sweet. You're 1-1 so far through 2 rounds, but you've played what you say is one of your rougher matchups both rounds, so.
Yeah, fortunately won round 1, but hopefully I don't play against it anymore. I want to play against red, white, and Abzan aggro.
All right, well, we're hoping for you. Good luck the rest of the way, man.
Thank you.
Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Houston.